Is this how World War III starts? That is what's on everyone's mind right now. Here's my take. This is by Caspian Report. I've been watching this channel for like 10 years.
In the early hours of June 13th, Israel launched preemptive strikes on Iran. Multiple explosions were heard.
And I just want to say, so I think I was in Thailand during this moment. I was pretty concerned. And my immediate thought is, well, maybe it's safer to be here than actually the US in a weird way. I mean, I would assume Thailand's going to be pretty neutral during the conflict. However, they were not neutral in World War II. They were kind of forced to pick a side there. By the way, before we jump into this video, it would help out a lot if you could subscribe to this channel, my channel, and Caspian Report. If you like geopolitics, it would help out tremendously. Thank you.
The Cold War has turned hot.
He immediately starts off with the term the Cold War. This has been a Cold War going on for a while now between Israel and Iran. This conflict's been brewing under the surface for quite a long time, and I have to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that it's turned, well, from a Cold War into a hot one.
Overnight. In the early hours of June 13th, Israel launched preemptive strikes on Iran. Multiple explosions were heard across Tehran, with online footage showing blasts lighting up the capital. But the fire that...
I was going to say, he's going to get into it, but it was not just the capital, as we saw from the previous map. It was all over Iran.
Started in the city didn't stop there. Additional explosions occurred in Isfahan, Tabriz, Kermanshah, Hamadan, Qom, and Piranshah, cities that host nuclear, military, or strategic sites.
That's the big thing is, well, Iran's threat to build a nuke. They've been trying, or there's been, thoughts that they have been building it for quite some time. In fact, I saw an article recently about an article from the 90s claiming Iran was very close to building a nuke. So this has been on the radar for obviously quite some time, like almost 30 years now. Maybe even longer than that.
Separate strikes also hit the Natanz nuclear site, the Arak heavy water reactor, and the Parchin military complex. Satellite imagery, for instance, shows considerable but likely superficial damage at Natanz. Either way, the initial 24 hours have been nothing short of a disaster for the Iranians.
It's very important to also keep in mind, like, the historical context. Like, we, specifically like the US, we've been trying to do regime change in Iran for decades now, like during the Cold War. So this is not that we've been wanting to do a coup in Iran or to change Iran basically ever since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Like, we have wanted to fix this. I remember when I was a kid growing up, George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil. It was Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. So, I mean, and it's been going back further than that. There's been U.S. presidents that have wanted to, I don't know, force Iran into more of a Western allied nation for quite some time.
Initial 24 hours have been nothing short of a disaster for the Iranians. Israeli jets are flying almost uncontested over Iranian airspace. Mossad operatives are roaming freely, launching drones and anti-tank guided missiles at key Iranian systems, all while Hezbollah remains on the sidelines. Already, multiple senior nuclear scientists and high-ranking military leaders have been killed. As was bound to happen, Iran responded harshly and launched waves of loitering munitions and ballistic missiles at Israel. Most of these were intercepted in the air, but some made it through. Tel Aviv was hit multiple times, and significant...
Tel Aviv is getting hit unlike ever before. And again, the worry that this is going to spiral into a World War III that a lot of people have, because right now it's just between Iran and Israel, obviously. That's what seemingly it can be to the untrained eye on the surface. But remember, Iranian allies, or the part of the world that tend to be more allied to Iran than others, is obviously Russia is the big one, Russia and China. So those are two, especially Russia though, and then you have Israel, which is allied to the US, and that's exactly how smaller powers can bring in bigger ones, causing a world conflict. Where have we seen that one before? I feel like we've seen that so many times in history.
Damage has been reported at Israel's Central Military Command Center. What we're seeing is unlike anything the region has witnessed before. The firepower unleashed makes Hezbollah...
Now, this video doesn't get into it, but something to keep in the back of your mind, because I just talked about Russia's role in this whole thing. Now, Russia is trying to stay out of it. kind of like the U.S. is, but also we don't even know what the U.S. is doing right now. But keep in mind, this is with like Syria now kind of up in the air. Syria used to be Russian aligned. Assad, he was very close with Putin and Russia, and obviously maybe just recently, like 6 months ago, he got kicked out. So now Russia doesn't play quite as huge of a role in the region. Specifically, obviously we're talking about the Middle East here, and that's the first time in over 10 years. So like the landscape of this region on Earth has been changing. The chess pieces on the chessboard, they're in definitely new spots.
Hezbollah and Hamas rockets look like toys by comparison. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has urged Israeli citizens to prepare for a prolonged conflict. And so it begins. When sirens replace speeches, war is no longer coming. It has arrived. In the immediate aftermath, Iran launched more than 100 drones toward Israel and vowed further retaliation. For its part, America has chosen not to intervene. U.S. Secretary of
I mean, fingers crossed. We don't really, we're seeing. Trump is saying all sorts of things. Trump has said both. He is not going to. There are reports behind the scenes that he's telling Israel he's not going to back Israel up in a war, but he's also at the same time talking about he is still guaranteeing their sovereignty. So it's kind of a wild card what the U.S. does here.
Of State.
If the U.S. joins in, then I will admit we're probably closer to World War III than we've been in a very long time. I mean, let's get one thing straight. Iran is not Afghanistan, and Iran is not Iraq. Those are two foes relatively close in the region Iraq is right there in the region that the U.S. has faced off against. Iran is a totally different beast. I mean, that would be a completely game changer. Iran's population, they're such a massive country, it would not be the same.
Marco Rubio insists the US had no role in the attacks, while President Trump is urging Iran to make a deal or
I mean, just on a geographical level, like comparing Iraq to Iran, the Iranian geography is going to mirror more of Afghanistan's geography, a bit more, way more mountainous, but way bigger, way more people. Like, the U.S. has planned for an invasion on Iran for such a long time, and I don't think we're prepared for it.
Face even more brutal attacks. This may well be a good cop, bad cop negotiating tactic. Around 260 media outlets reported on this story, most of them right-leaning. This is also how governments negotiate when they try to talk without saying things directly. They employ the media. But even so, reaching a deal now will be difficult. Among the casualties is Ali Shamkhani, a close confidant of the supreme leader and Iran's...
More context to keep in mind is that Iran just recently got this new president when the former president perished in a plane crash. These are all little minor moments leading up to this, which obviously are playing a huge role in what's happening right now.
Ali Shamkhani, a close confidant of the supreme leader and Iran's chief nuclear negotiator. So there's a lot to piece together when it comes to understanding what's coming next. As of this time, the full extent of Israel's attack on Iran is still unknown. The initial strikes appear to have targeted radars, air defenses.
Yeah, so far with recording this video, it feels like there's constantly there's constantly attacks back and forth between these two countries. Even I saw a video of someone was on a commercial flight seeing ballistic missiles being launched way up in space, which is insane that we're seeing that right now. Obviously, the airspace, a lot of places are obviously avoiding that region for good reason.
Aircraft.
Also, Iraq apparently has like zero say over their own airspace at this point because both nations are just launching things.
And control towers, which paves the way for follow-up attacks on secondary sites. Israel's attention will now turn to the secondary targets of strategic and
This is also a fascinating conflict because these two nations do not border each other, but they're obviously close enough. There is a direct land border between them, but they're just like launching things like in a modern warfare scenario, even like dating back, like this is a very strange thing to see happen, basically, because it's just all the air warfare. There is land for them to go through, but they'd have to go through neutral territory.
Economic nature, such as ports.
So they're just blasting each other, especially over other countries' foreign airspace.
Refineries and missile factories. The Israeli military said as much when it described the operation as the first stage, signaling that more attacks could follow in the next few days, if not weeks. But even if Israel's next wave of attacks is tactically successful, dismantling Iran's nuclear program entirely would require direct American involvement.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get into it, but I mean, Israel's best bet here is just to slow them down wherever they are. I don't think anyone truly knows where Iran is in terms of their nuclear development, but they probably are not going to be able to just like hit enough targets. They especially haven't already hit enough targets. If you're thinking that they just like the things that they hit has already just like shut down all of Iran's nuclear hopes, no, that's not how it's going to play out. Iran definitely still has a chance. They can slow them down. That's basically what they're trying to do. Slow them down by years or maybe even decades. Maybe that's possible, but there's always going to be a chance. And then you got to keep in mind too, when a nation gets nukes, it's over. Everything completely changes. Look at North Korea. I mean, Iran getting nukes has been on everyone's mind for quite some time. There's currently 9 nations with nukes. Israel is one of them. But look at when North Korea got nukes. Everything has changed. Now, you cannot get rid of the current... you can't really... I mean, it's been unprecedented to get rid of the current leadership when a nation has nukes. It's going to be so difficult to get Kim Jong-un out, or, I mean, honestly, for the world's sake, you kind of worry about any instability in the country as soon as the country does get nukes. Because, I mean, look at North Korea. Can you imagine the chaos? Look at the fear of what happened when the Soviet Union dissolved. Because obviously that country had a ton of nukes, and then all of a sudden the Soviet Union broke into many different pieces, with Ukraine having some of the nukes in their territory. Ukraine infamously giving it back, having to give it back to the Russian Federation, and now that's been pretty ironic given their current situation.
US involvement, Israel can't do it. At best, they might delay Iran's progress by 1 to 2 years. At worst...
Yeah, I mean, everything changes if Iran gets a nuke. So, I mean, if they're trying to do regime change, whether it's Israel or the West or the US, you would have to do it right now, because the moment they get nukes, it's just not going to happen. It's going to be really scary. And then, in a weird way, like I just said, the world's going to be incentivized to just keep whatever leader is in power for as long as humanly possible. Like, can you imagine the chaos that would take place if North Korea fell into a civil war? I mean, that's just a terrifying thought.
First, the strikes could backfire, prompting Iran to rapidly assemble a crude nuclear device as a deterrent against future attacks. Though Israel claims its goal is to take out Iran's nuclear program and prevent it from building a nuclear bomb, its actions suggest a deeper objective: regime change.
And again, yeah, regime change is not going to be possible if there is nukes built. Look, and I think the entire world has now been confirmed. Like, if you have like a government in charge that maybe the West is not a fan of, then your number one thing to do is to build nukes. Because look at Libya with Gaddafi. Gaddafi gave up his nukes, and look how that ended for him. Like that in 2011, that just confirmed to the entire world, if you don't have nukes, you are not going to be safe, and you need to build nukes as soon as possible, essentially, or else who knows what will happen to you. You know, don't trust. You can't trust the U.S. That's for sure.
All the Israeli attacks have so far targeted IRGC officials while avoiding the leadership of Iran's regular armed forces, which may be a calculated attempt at divide and rule. You see, the Revolutionary Guards and the regular military often operate at odds, with the IRGC holding dominance in both political and economic spheres. So
that's always the goal. I mean, that's basically been a U.S. strategy in a way in Latin America since the Cold War days, or even before that. I mean, just put a military dictatorship in charge, and maybe that's what Israel's trying to do right now. You get a certain branch of the military, or the military in general, to take control, oust the current leadership, boom, throw a country in a military dictatorship, and hope that you'll be able to work with them a little bit more than the current regime.
by degrading the IRGC, Israel may be trying to provoke internal friction, perhaps even encouraging the regular military to turn against the Revolutionary Guards in a bid for power.
I mean, that's a really smart move. I have to say, like, that's a very smart... If you could do that, I mean, it's deadly, and it'd be a horrific thing for the Iranians, because... who knows what kind of chaos could take place. I mean, you're literally talking about a possible civil war if that is the case. But from an outsider, if you're Iran's rival and you want to end them, that is definitely the way to do it. You just got to get some new leadership in charge, maybe work with them a bit more, and hope and negotiate that they do not build nukes.
Tellingly, Israel's campaign is called Operation Rising Lion, which is likely a nod to the pre-revolution Iranian flag and suggests that regime change may be the ultimate objective.
Even going back to the old Persia days, maybe they're trying to restore the Persian Empire in a way. One thing that I think that needs to be taken note of, even if Iran does somehow get a nuke, I don't think they're going to immediately launch it at Israel. Maybe that's what Israel thinks. However, and I don't think Israel thinks that would happen either. But I'm not saying that would never happen. But I'm just saying that the day one, they're not going to throw it at Israel. Probably not. I think the chances of that are very unlikely. However, the diplomatic game that takes place in the Middle East is going to completely change forever. Like, the state of the Middle East will be fundamentally changed probably for the foreseeable future, and that is the bigger issue. Again, there is always a threat that, yes, maybe Iran could nuke Israel or vice versa. Obviously, Israel has nukes, and they're not nuking Iran right now, but it's more of just like how much that will change day one. The moment they don't even need to test their first nuke. They could maybe just say it and kind of prove it in certain ways. Because remember that we didn't even know that Israel had nukes for a very long time. It wasn't until it was confirmed by, was it South Africa back in the day? You don't necessarily need to detonate it to confirm you have a nuke.
Whether that gamble pays off is another question entirely. Comparably, Tehran's strategy is also regime change, but through more legal means. The Iranians know they can't change Netanyahu's mind, but they might just be able to collapse his government by building up domestic pressure and triggering a vote of no confidence.
And that has been on a lot of people's minds for quite some time now, since 2022. Bibi is, well, right now, I mean, I don't know. They'd have to cause a lot of Israelis to rise up and oust him, essentially, but he's still in charge.
To do this, Iranians will need to deliver maximum harm to Israel, but do so by focusing on infrastructure, military, and leadership targets.
I'm just just so shocked that this has just continued to grow and grow and grow since 2022. It has just gotten bigger and bigger. I did not think we would come to the point where Israel would be firing rockets into Iran and vice versa, and those rockets getting through. Again, I was in Thailand, and I was actually a little bit shocked. Not even a little bit. I was in shock at the news that I was reading.
While avoiding civilian sites as much as possible, which may be difficult in practice. And so the Iranians will want to launch waves of missiles at Israel day after day in the hope that it might lead to a vote of no confidence.
I mean, if Israel can... This is the final stand here. If Israel can somehow bring regime change in Iran, then they're kind of good. They've been making so many diplomatic moves in the background with Saudi Arabia. Now with Syria, the whole situation in Syria happening. This is their biggest rival. This is the final showdown for the region. So that is why, obviously, things are so tense right now.
This would be a political victory that helps Tehran save face and boost its position in future negotiations. But again, there is no guarantee that it would work. Regime change is less a strategy than a roll of the dice.
Let the
The
chaos
behavior
in.
of both Iran and Israel in the coming weeks will depend on a mix of military, political, regional, and strategic factors. Even a slight shift in one variable, like a US statement of support, could trigger ripple effects that drastically alter their next moves. In such a volatile moment, weak retaliation from Iran won't deter Israel, but a strong one risks drawing America into the war. That's precisely
Yes.
what Israel may try to provoke, escalating in hopes of pulling America in.
That is what is on a lot of people's mind, especially on Twitter. I mean, how many times in history, U.S. history, has a false flag been justification for war? Because, mind you, I think he's going to get into, he's going to show a map here, but we have Iran completely surrounded with U.S. bases. Completely in so much of the region. Because, like I said, we've been planning a potential war with Iran for literal decades. So there's plenty of U.S. soldiers already in the region, a lot of military bases. Here's the thing, Iran is not trying to draw the U.S. into this war. If a U.S. base gets hit, man, that is going to be a crazy day on Twitter. I can tell you that right now.
By contrast, Iran
Because there's going to be so much speculation on what the hell is going on.
will likely aim to respond in a way that shows strength and reestablishes deterrence while avoiding a wider conflict.
Yes, because up until this point, I would say Iran has been pretty much they haven't been doing jack shit. They've been actually just all talk, no bite, just a dog that's just barking. In my opinion, when a couple months ago when they launched that like strike and like basically all of the missiles got intercepted, like barely anything got through. That was like Iran's like diplomatic move. It's like, okay, well, we are going to do something, but it's not going to be that effective. They had to finally, I mean, for their own sake, or they would just lose all credibility. They had to, finally, with their own people. Again, if you're putting yourself in the head of state of Iran's shoes, basically, he had to do something at this point. Because 6 months ago, he was, it was just all talk.
What the Iranians will likely want are strikes that preserve an off-ramp for de-escalation, for example, by giving advance warning to the United States and regional countries. It took a similar approach during Operation True Promise in April 2024
There you go.
when it launched.
Dude, I have no concept of time anymore, obviously, as you can see. I can't tell it was like 6 months ago to 3 years ago at this point. But yes, this is exactly what I was talking about. That was kind of like a big old nothing burger. The Nothing Ever Happens community had a big day that day because something happened, but ultimately it was nothing.
Launched a large-scale drone and missile attack on Israel, but avoided triggering a wider conflict.
Yeah.
So, at this stage, it's a matter of sustainment versus escalation. Israel may have deflected much of Iran's first few waves of attacks, but its stockpile of
And now this video doesn't get into it, but again, like I said earlier, you have to keep in mind the bigger powers kind of watching over this, and that's the US and Russia. Now, right now, there's nothing happening. I would definitely bet the US would do something first before Russia. Russia got their hands full right now with Ukraine, so Russia is probably not trying to do anything to get them dragged into a second conflict into the Middle East and helping out Iran. But the problem is the U.S. If the U.S. decides, okay, Israel, if the U.S. thinks that Israel's sovereignty is at risk here, then they will absolutely do something about it. And if they start bombing Iran, then it's very likely that and if Iran starts to look like they're going to have their own regime change, then Russia is definitely going to do something about it. And again, that's how World War III can spiral into or we spiral into a World War III and chaos, obviously.
interceptors won't hold out forever. Iran can try to wear down Israeli defenses, fire enough missiles at enough targets, and some will inevitably get through.
Again, not just Iraq has like literally no say in their airspace, but neither does Jordan either. It's kind of crazy.
However, Iran will face attrition of its own. Drones are plentiful but relatively easy to shoot down. Ballistic missiles are far more destructive and harder to intercept, but they're not easily replaced. Iran is believed to have an arsenal of around 3,000 ballistic missiles. While not all have the range to reach Israel, enough could break through Israeli and US air defenses to inflict serious damage and force Netanyahu's political hand.
So yeah, I mean the things that are hitting Tel Aviv right now, it's unheard of. Like this has never been seen before. So that could definitely cause a lot of internal strife inside of Israel, and maybe kicking Bibi out. I mean they're both looking, it seems like, for the same thing, is get the current leadership out and just pray that the next one's going to be better.
Again, it comes down to a strategy of sustainment versus escalation. In years past, Iran wouldn't have relied solely on its missiles. Its first line of defense was its network of Arab proxies, specifically Hezbollah.
And Iran's been doing that for a minute now. They've been kind of funding and working with proxies, not just against Israel, but anyone else in the region that they don't like.
But after a year of fighting with Israel, Hezbollah is now much weaker. Many of its leaders have been killed, and much of its hierarchy has been infiltrated by Mossad agents.
The pager thing was crazy. When Israel did, they gave them a bunch of pagers and they blew, and they were just, they really knocked out Hezbollah.
Still has a large missile and rocket arsenal, but using them now would be politically risky. The Lebanese government is struggling to rebuild and has warned Hezbollah not to drag the country into another war on Iran's behalf. Thus, Hezbollah is sitting this one out. Alternatively, to re-establish deterrence, Iran could employ its proxies to launch a series of
Look at all the proxies. They've got them all over the place.
Of attacks on American forces stationed in Jordan, Syria, and Iraq.
Okay, so this is also showing a map of kind of U.S. military bases, which, again, like I said, are completely surrounding Iran right now.
At the same time, the Houthis in Yemen could launch missiles at Israel and possibly target remaining U.S. naval ships in the Red Sea. However, this would be a terribly risky move. Directly attacking US assets could prompt retaliation against the Iranian leadership, something akin to the January 2020 assassination of Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani. The end result could see the US Air Force doing even more damage than Israel's airstrikes.
And that's what Israel wants. Israel really needs that. If the U.S. could start doing our own airstrikes, we're going to be able to hit a lot deeper into the country. Iran is kind of on a knife's edge. They have to be so careful because obviously they do not want the U.S. to get involved. But, you know, it's such a mess. This is really a messy situation, and every single day that goes by, there's more information, and it's a little scary because I'm not seeing it de-escalate literally at all.
Another way for Iran to establish deterrence, and less expected, would be to strike US allies in the Gulf region. For example, Iran could use its proxies to attack oil facilities in Saudi Arabia like it did in 2019, or hit targets in the UAE as it did in 2022. Attacking the oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf region, including ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, would almost certainly cause oil prices to surge. In such a scenario, Gulf leaders who have pledged hundreds of billions.
I mean, oil is going to, if you mess with the world's oil supply, that is 100, that's a surefire way to get the U.S. involved. If something happens with oil, the U.S. is definitely going to jump in. You know, you mess with trade, you mess with oil, there's like certain resources that the U.S. just can't have people mess with. And so I'm thinking, is this a scenario where Iran has to, they already are fighting against the U.S., so this is some of their, I mean, keep in mind that the U.S. has been planning all sorts of different invasions on Iran, but I can guarantee you Iran has been doing the same thing to us. I mean, that's literally, there's this museum, the inside of Tehran, called what is it called? I don't know if it's called like Death to America or something like that. But every single day, Iran wakes up and they are always thinking of how they can get back at the U.S., how they could do the most damage. The U.S. is the U.S. has got a lot of things on their mind. They're focused on so many other things. Iran's got one thing, and that is how they would defeat the U.S. in possibly a defensive war.
Billions in investments to the United States.
Not only the U.S., but Israel as well.
States would likely push Trump to rein in Israel and halt its attacks on Iran. There is no guarantee that it would work, but sometimes the shortest path to victory goes through someone else's backyard. Having said that, any Iranian attack on Gulf Arab states, while possible, would likely end the improving diplomatic ties Iran has worked to build with those countries in recent years.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's how, like, if they were to do this, if they were to hit other Arab nations like this, I mean, that's literally how you pull everyone on Israel's side. Arguably, that's kind of already how it is. Saudi Arabia is definitely going to be probably on Israel's side more than Iran's and a lot of these other nations. But yeah, as you just said, Iran has been trying to get on a better diplomatic position than they were.
Every form of retaliation carries some risk of blowback. Yet, perhaps the strongest form of deterrence for Iran would be to conduct a nuclear test. It would signal to both Israel and the United States that Iran is no longer bluffing about its nuclear ambitions, but it would also provoke international outrage, trigger new sanctions, and deepen Iran's isolation.
I mean, dang. I don't know exactly where they are in terms of how isolated they've been, but it's hard to imagine they can get that. I'm sure it could get worse for them, but how much worse? That's going to be too difficult to tell, but they've been isolated for quite some time.
Still, if the Iranian government sees its survival at stake, the supreme leader may decide the cost is worth it. A nuclear test would force the Israelis and Americans to weigh the risk of turning a conventional conflict into a nuclear one. At the very least, Tehran may opt for a non-kinetic response, one that signals.
And I'm seeing BB all over U.S. news, like trying to get the U.S. involved, talking to the American people, things like that. I don't know. I don't think it's working, to be quite honest, because I only see people making memes about, from both sides of the political aisle, to be honest, that they do not want war. I mean, this is classic U.S. stuff, though, historically. We do not want conflict. The American people, believe it or not always, not in every instance. There's been moments where we have, wanted conflict. But for the most part, the American people are usually very isolationist. The American government is a completely different thing, though.
Nuclear intent, but keeps it ambiguous enough to avoid immediate escalation. Iranian officials have long warned they would leave the non-proliferation treaty if their nuclear program came under military attack. That moment may now be near. Overall, the course of both Israeli and Iranian actions in the coming weeks will depend on the scale and intensity of what each side does next. The longer the attacks continue and the more damage they inflict, the smaller the window for de-escalation. With every strike and counterstrike, controlling what comes next grows more difficult, because despite best efforts, precision strikes rarely end with precision outcomes.
Dang, talk about a fire line. I'm literally thinking about the that gif of the guy like writing he's writing a letter with like, and the pen is on fire, basically. Basically, this stuff only brings me to, it makes me think of one thing, and just like how we are very much entering a multipolar world. You can feel it with the U.S. You can feel it as we're trying to consolidate our power. I mean, we're literally living kind of more in a time, for the first time, we had a brief segment of like 30 years where the U.S. was kind of the number one power. There was just one giant power in the world, and now things are going, and that is not normal. That historically is just not what it's supposed to be. Even during the Cold War, that's not normal either. There wasn't supposed to be, historically speaking, there's never been just two major powers. We're going back to a multipolar world, which is how the vast majority of human history, that's just how it's been. We're going back to like early 1900s, where there's a bunch of regional powers and you have spheres of influence, and everyone currently, what's going on, the way I like to explain it, is as everyone is trying to gather up their spheres of influence. They're trying to fight for their own spheres inside of the world. Israel's like, hey, this is, I'm a major player in the Middle East. I'm sure they're not arguing that they're the only major player, but they're trying to solidify their spot in the world. Russia is trying to solidify their power over Ukraine. The U.S., literally trying to annex Canada at this point. So everyone is trying to gather up their own regions or even continents in a way as we enter into something that was more akin to like the 19th century, the 1800s, where there's all these different empires and all these different ruling powers in subsets. Now, how many powers will there be heading into the future? We won't know, but time will definitely tell. Like I said, please subscribe to Caspian Report. Please subscribe here for more content like this. I'll keep you updated. These are the patrons for this month. If you'd like to join, check that link down below to patreon.com. If Greenland is the largest island, then Australia is its own continent again, right? Drew Supremacy League. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund. Rip Grandpa. Connor Pavlik. Carmel S. DOOCHBAGGINS. Alexander the Terrible. Fredrik Tibblin. KingBearHaze. LuxembourgLover. Migloo the Goat. Nolan. NordTyrol. And Tambre.